Oh, hi everyone. Hope you don't mind my sort of weird video. But I wanted to go through the Star Trek timeline from a fan's perspective. And I should probably point out this is not the official timeline, but this is kind of how I think about the series, being a long-term fan. And I know there's a lot of other fans who feel the same way. So we have basically 3 different universes here. The original timeline and the Kelvin timeline I'm going to look at first. There's another timeline though, which I'm also going to look at, but that's just coming up in a little bit. So, there's also the mirror universe, which I'm not going to go into today, but basically the mirror universe kind of happens alongside the original timeline, and you can see it in many episodes. The Star Trek starts with Star Trek Enterprise, which is actually a very underrated series. When I first started watching it, I was quite skeptical about it because it was so different from the other Star Treks, but I quickly got accustomed to it, and actually during season 2, and season 3 even, they had some really good episodes, and there was a sort of consistent quality about the episodes which the original series and TNG lacked. And I personally really loved it, really got into it. I wish there was more series made of it. Then of course we've got the original movies and the original series, as well as the animated series. All of these are in the original timeline. And of course when we come up to the Next Generation, which again, when I was a kid, this is really where I was watching Star Trek. Absolutely loved the original series as well as the Next Generation. And we've got in here DS9 and Voyager, and we've got all the movies basically up to Star Trek Nemesis. Now, interestingly, what happened in Star Trek Nemesis was, well, as we saw, Data died, but there's kind of a problem here, because if you look at the last episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, we can see that Picard is alive, Data is alive. We can see the Starfleet is very nice, it's functional. This is kind of the future of the original universe. Now notice Picard here has a beard, but he's kind of got a sort of syndrome, which I think it's eremorphic syndrome. I should have looked it up before the video. But he's kind of got a neurodegenerative disease which affects him. But nevertheless, even though he struggles, everyone in this universe still loves and respects him. They think about him as a really good leader. He's kind of a really great man. We've got Data here. Now you might be thinking, Data died at the end of Nemesis. Why is Data here? Well, there is a simple explanation for that. Let's move on to the next picture. Here is Data with B4. Now B4 was an inferior prototype of Data and Lore, and before Data sort of sacrificed himself to save the Enterprise and his friends, he downloaded all of his memories into B4. Now this is sort of Data sacrificing himself. Basically what happened in the original and good timeline, which is pretty obvious, I would say, is basically B4 was made of inferior parts. So after Data's death, Geordi LaForge, as well as other cybernetic experts, would basically try to upgrade B4 with superior parts. They already had all the scans and the biometric data for Data, so it would have been fairly simple to upgrade B4 to become a new Data, and then B4 would have continued on as this Data we see here. The kind of Data who went on to teach at Oxford University, the Data who was perhaps a bit eccentric, but basically because of the love and compassion of the original universe, we see Data sort of restored to working order, and this is kind of the good ending. Okay, let's go back to the events of 2387. Okay, so now in 2387 there was a supernova, which we can actually see in the Star Trek movie, which kind of created the Kelvin timeline. And that's kind of like a spin-off universe, which is pretty good. I liked these movies. I really enjoyed them. The first one I thought was great. It looked absolutely brilliant, and the other ones are great, but the first one I thought was pretty decent. Anyway, there was a funny kind of problem with the events of 2387, where Romulus was destroyed, and it actually created what we might call the Prime Universe, or as I call it, the Turd Universe. Now you might think this is crude, but it is actually an apt description of this horrible dystopian universe. So, let's look at some of the events of Picard, for example. The Picard is in the Prime Universe, and horrible things happen all the time. People have their heads chopped off. Icheb here, former Borg drone, has his eye ripped out. There's all kinds of horrible, disgusting things, people being killed all the time, shot down. There's no respect for human life. Androids like Data have been outlawed. And generally speaking, if the original timeline was the good universe, this is the sort of terrible universe. Now, we have to bring in STD, or Star Trek Discovery. And I know some people call it something else, but I'm going to call it STD because it is a load of rubbish. You basically have a ship full of really hyper-emotional, annoying people, and they don't act like adults or normal human beings. They're all crying all the time, and they don't behave in any kind of way like a professional paramilitary organization would. It sort of seems like the series is written by sort of hyper-emotional teenagers. There's a thing that always gets said on the internet, which is, you were not the target market for this horrible show. Well, yeah, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not some kind of snivelling, hyper-emotional person who wants to watch all the sort of latest buzzwords and all the latest Democrat nonsense out of America. I'm someone who prefers the original timeline, and to be honest, I don't really have too much of a problem with Lower Decks. I kind of don't think it's a very good show, but I'm going to put it in the Turd Universe because, heck, everything else seems to be in the Turd Universe, also the Prime Universe. And the only thing I don't really like about Lower Decks is it kind of takes the piss out of the original Star Trek a lot. So, for example, the last episode I watched, which wasn't bad by the way, there was a massive disaster on the ship, and everyone kind of just treated it like, oh, this is just another boring day on the starship. Oh, look, people died, this is so boring. I don't really feel that it's kind of good to take the piss out of a previous series when they've got such a fan following and such a nice legacy. But again, I'm not super against Lower Decks. Still, I'm going to put it in the Turd Universe. So that is the universe explained by a fan of the series. Obviously, I'm not a fan of STD or of Picard because Picard is kind of gross and disgusting, and it's a horrible dystopian version of the original timeline. So those are the 3 timelines. Now, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think, and I will speak to you guys soon.